Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi there, my name is Miftah Maryana, and how are you today? I hope you are doing good. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the analysis of short story entitled The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. But before that, I want to tell you about the author of this story. Edgar Allan Poe was born on January 19, 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, United States. He was died on October 7, 1849 in Baltimore, Maryland, United States, when he was 40 years old. And he was American writer, poet, editor, and literacy critic. Okay, let's discuss the summary. In Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Hearts, the narrator attempts to prove his own sanity in the wake of having murdered an old man. The Telltale Heart is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, first published in 1843. The genre of this short story is Gothic literature or Gothic horror, which is a genre that covers horror, death, and at times romance. It follows an unnamed, unreliable narrator who insists on his sanity after murdering an old man with a vulture eye. The unreliable narrator explains that he loved the old man very much, but was disturbed by the old man's evil eye, which he alleged drove him to murder. The murder is carefully calculated, and the murdered hides the body by cutting it into pieces and hiding in under the floorboards. And ultimately, the narrator's guilt manifests itself in the hallucination that the man's heart is still beating under the floorboards. The police arrive after a neighbor reports having heard a scream, and the narrator begins to hear the old man's heart beating beneath the floor. Disturbed, he admits his crime to the police. Setting. This short story takes place in the 1800s in the setting room of the old man's house at night. Characterization. There are 4 characterizations. The first is the narrator. The second is the old man. The third is 3 policemen, and the last is neighbor. The narrator. He is the central character of the story. He is aware of his insane thoughts and yet justifies them as sane because he can still strategize and think intelligently. The old man. The old man is a person of great suspense. He seems to be on good terms with the narrator and is, by all means, a good person. However, he has one ugly-looking pale eye, and that creates a problem in the mind of the narrator. He seems to be a quiet and lonely person and probably lives alone in his room. And the third, three policemen. They are jovial and do not suspect foul play when they meet the narrator. In fact, they are easily duped by the narrator's calm demeanor and end up chatting with him for a long time. And the last is neighbor. It was this neighbor who alerted the police about the noise in the old man's house. And this is the plot: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Exposition. The narrator decides he must kill the old man. The unnamed narrator begins to recount some past events involving an old man, events which he claims even prove his sanity. He said that at first he didn't hate the old man, that he even loved him because the old man had done nothing to him. He mentions that the old man has strange, vulture-like eye, and that the old man's eye give the narrator a strange cold feeling when he looked at them. It gets worse and worse to the point where the unnamed narrator decides that the only thing to do is kill the old man so the vulture eye could never look at him again. Rising action. For 7 nights he entered the old man's room. The unnamed narrator goes on to explain that he is not mad after all. The madman cannot murder. He then details how every day of the next week he is friendly to the old man, and at night he creeps into his room. For 7 days, though, he was unable to kill the old man because he closed his eyes. After all, it was the vulture eye that forced the unnamed narrator to kill the old man. Climax. The narrator killed the old man. On the 8th night, the old man woke up when the narrator entered the room. The old man knew that someone was there, and he even screamed in fear. The narrator is finally able to see the awful vulture eye, and this is what ultimately allows him to kill the old man. After killing the old man, the unnamed narrator dismembered his body and placed it under the floorboard. Following action. 3 policemen respond to a call. The narrator invited them in. The next day, 3 police officers come to visit the narrator because a neighbor told them about a strange sound coming from the old man's house. And the last is resolution. The narrator hears the old man's heartbeat and confesses. The narrator explains that he invited the policeman in, confident in his success. Suddenly, though, he began to hear the beating of the old man's heart under the floorboards. He thought the policemen were playing a joke on him when they said they couldn't hear it, and the beating of the heart got worse and worse until the narrator was compelled to reveal his crime. Point of view. The Telltale Heart is a gothic horror story which is told in first-person point of view. It is a dramatic monologue told from the perspective of the person who has committed a murder. Through telling the story from first person point of view, Poe lets the readers creep into the mind of the criminal and creates a nervous and suspense effect to the story. Theme. There are three themes in this short story. The first is guilt, and the second is madness and sanity, and the third is time. Guilt. The narrator confesses his crime because his guilt grows too great that he can no longer hold it in. Madness and sanity. The narrator's attempt to prove his sanity as he explains his meticulous plans for killing the old man's only prove his madness. And time. The narrator is obsessed by time. And the last is moral values. The first is do not hate people for their flaws. And the second is no crime can be hidden. Okay, thank you for uh, listening my monologue. And I'm sorry for making mistakes on this video. And the last I say, see you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.